Serious, Redditors who witnessed a murder, what is your story? Saw my friend get shot in the head and died a few minutes later during a crossfire between her oldest brother and the police. Was very heartbreaking. I still miss her 22 years later. We were playing on a field next to her house and her brother was watching us. He pulled a gun out, started shooting as soon as he saw the police. I didn't think this would get a lot of attention. Thank you for all the awards and all the happy cake days. For the ones who posted on here, for some reason I cannot see them on the post. But, thank you. Sorry if I have not replied to everyone. Used to work at a movie theater. I would change the sign near the road in the middle of the night. I saw a taxi pull up to the bus stop. It stayed there for quite some time. That's what caught my attention was how long it was there for. Saw a dude get out and quickly walk away. A week later I was changing the sign again and I hear a voice below asking me to come down. After he showed me his badge I obliged and he asked if I had seen anything weird the week before. I replied only that a taxi had sat there for a while and a guy got out. I had to then go look at lots of mugshots. Turns out I was the sole witness to some poor bastard's murder without even realizing it. Wish I had a better look at the guy so I could get him some justice. When I was 6 my family went to see Sesame Street on Ice downtown. When we were leaving a little girl my age was struck by a van and drug across the parking lot. I remember the mother jumping on the windshield screaming at the driver while the van was still moving. My mom was a nurse and was helping until the ambulance arrived but she was already dead. I can still remember the screams and lifeless body of that little girl. This was over 30 years ago. I saw a few in Mexico. The most memorable one was the first one I saw while I lived there. I was cleaning out a house with some buddies of mine. A guy was walking down the block. We heard gunshots. I looked out the window and there was that same guy laying out on the sidewalk. A black pickup truck sped by. I think there were 4 guys on back, all with bandanas covering their faces, all with guns in their hands. The thing that stuck with me is they all looked younger than me. I was 22 at the time. According to the paper that was released right after he was from out of town and likely they mistook him as someone else, he was 17. His blood was left on the streets for days. One of my friends said he heard 14 shots but I only heard 6. I have the whole experience written down as it was so foreign to me. This was in Altamirano. I used to stay up late at night trying to think of what kind of life would lead those guys to do a drive-by like that. I also wonder about that 17-year-old, I'm sure he had family visiting there. Was at a bar. Couple guys got into an argument. The whole thing subsides, then a few hours later one of them leaves. As the guy is leaving, the other guy he was arguing with earlier runs outside and punches him in the back of the head killing him instantly. Only other time I've seen someone die was on the highway, not murder here. Guy jumped off a bridge I was driving under, had a rope tied off and hanged himself. Got smashed by a truck before he died though, caused a really big mess. Hell maybe the rope broke his neck before getting plowed into. Saw my neighbor murdered in cold blood in my own driveway. My neighbor was helping his lady friend escape a very abusive relationship. Lady's ex hunted her down like a dog. Saw my neighbor walking back home with her after they went to get food for his kids. Heard 3 loud pops. I ran outside to find her screaming and him blown out of his shoes and into my driveway. He had a hole in his chest big enough to put my fist in. There was nothing I could do to save him except sit with him and hold his hand while I prayed for him to pass quickly. I'll never forget that night. 48 hours later I broke the lease on my house and moved in with my boyfriend who lives in a much safer borough. You were an awesome neighbor and a wonderful father, Kane. You're certainly missed. Edit for those wanting news articles. Edit number 2 Yes I get it. I misspelled his name. It was an accident. We all aren't perfect. Was going to work one day when a van hit a cyclist. Saw the person fly through the air. Looked like a mannequin. I kept talking to the body, but, with blood coming from his ears, I knew he was dead. Unfortunately they never released the name of the victim. I would have liked to have visited the grave. Some of the other witnesses were messed up, but I was, and still am, okay with it. I read that one's hearing is the last thing to go. If I am ever in that bad situation again, I will talk more conversationally. At a pub about 2 years ago, large group out the front arguing, then a guy got blindsided and punched in the side of the head. The guy that hit him sprinted off into the darkness. The guy went down and never got up. His wife watched it happen and was trying to get him to wake up while the fighting and arguing continued. 30 minutes go by and he guy hasn't moved since being punched. Bar staff have been doing CPR on him for about 15 minutes before emergency services finally arrive and continue. Turns out he was brain dead on impact. They kept him alive somehow until the morning but turned life support off the following afternoon. The guy was 46, at his local bar and got killed. Heaps shit thing to see. They'll never forget that night. The guy that hit him was 19, got charged with murder and is in jail as we speak. Edit. Some people are wondering why he got charged with murder and not manslaughter. In Australia we have a thing called coward punch laws. Basically if you blindside someone or king hit them you get charged with murder, 8 years minimum. Personally, I believe he deserved a murder charge. Watching that man go limp and hit the ground and the attacker running away was one of the most sickening things I've ever seen. He came up behind him and punched the guy above his ear. He had no idea it was coming. Pretty much instantly made him brain dead, in front of his wife. No sympathy for the attacker here. Was walking home one day and saw a couple arguing. The dude started walking off away from the girlfriend's car, and apparently she was not happy with that. She proceeded to get in the car and wait about 5 minutes till he was way off down the sidewalk. I was walking on the opposite side of the road as him, and all of a sudden I see a blur and he goes flying like a rocket. She must have been going at least 60 miles per hour. He flew through the air and hit a tree. Died instantly. The women then screamed out the window at his body and drives away. There was blood smeared all over the crumpled hood, and I'll never forget the sight of his contorted body at the base of the tree, almost folded in half. I had to talk to the police, and within the hour they caught her at a car wash, trying to clean the blood and chunks off the hood and grill of her car. I was 16 at the time. For those of you concerned, thank you. I actually did have to see a therapist for a few months after. I am doing very well right now. However, I don't think I'll ever fully get over it. It's one of those things that always sticks with you. Obviously a lot of led up to the story, but I'm not going there. My girlfriend was taking her dog for a walk while I got showered for work. I'm in the bathroom when I hear voices coming from outside. I look out the window, and to my horror there is my girlfriend talking to her abusive stepfather, who is standing about 5 away from her. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I knew it wasn't good. Stepfather raises his shotgun, shoots my girlfriend in the face, then shoves shotgun under his chin and pulls the trigger. Murder-suicide. Life's never been the same for me since. Lots of messages, so I wanted to say this. Thank you all for the support. It was 20 years ago, and though I'll never get over it, I can live with it. It took nearly 2 years before I came to realize there was nothing I could have done to stop it. I will never forgive her family for knowing what that man was doing to her, and they did nothing about it. I'm not really good with words, but I wanted to thank everyone for the kindness and support. Worked at a skating rink in the late 80s/early 90s. I was in my late teens. It was Sunday Soul Night session. Very crowded. About 600 that night. As we were trying to clear the parking lot after closing, gunfire erupted between two gangs. Everybody hit the deck while the shootout happened. A 12-year-old girl panicked while coming from inside and started running. She ran into the crossfire and took one to the head about 6 feet away from me. Killed instantly. Here is the article about the rink itself being a magnet for problems. I've seen people die in combat since, but being a little girl is what haunts me about that one. Edit. Full article. I was around 8 to 9 years old, and we were in a vacation village. While we were doing checkout with my family, my father was at the desk while we were waiting at the lobby couches. An argument broke out between two guys who were at the lobby bar. I actually don't know what it was about, because it was in another language. One of the guys grabbed a bottle, smashed it, and attacked the other one, hit him in the neck. That guy fell on the floor, and there were blood all over the place. My mother closed my eyes after that, and took us out while other people get involved. Years later I've learned that guy lost his life. In the parking lot of a strip mall in Washington State, a guy walked into a jewelry store and did an armed robbery. Plainclothes security guard waited until the robber exited and shot the robber in the back. I was in a car and I didn't hear the shot, but I did see him fall and some shoppers gathering around his body. We drove by slowly to see if help was needed. When I saw how fast the pool of blood was spreading, I pretty much knew he would not survive. When I was 10, my uncle murdered my mom's boyfriend at our house. It wasn't in the house, but he chased him through our house and killed him outside in front of the house. It really destroyed a part of our family as well as relationship between my mom and grandmother. It was 30 years ago and I am only one alive besides my uncle that was there that night. I wanted to thank everyone for the kind words and the questions. Kinda therapeutic to talk about. Pop pop pop. Fireworks on Halloween? That's weird, but whatever. Pop pop pop. Oh. It's someone dead in a car. I should call 911. For me, the surprising thing was just how anticlimactic the experience was. It was just surreal. I don't know if they ever caught the guy, but it was a drug-related murder. The murderer was in the car with him, so it was probably someone the victim trusted. I was 16 driving down the highway in the passenger seat of my mom's car, about 3:30 p.m. Traffic came to a complete halt and we were in the right-hand lane. So as we're creeping along, a semi-truck appears on the shoulder of the highway, door swung wide open. As we move past, there is a trail of blood down the doorstep onto the concrete and then leading about 20 feet further down the road. As we crept further, the trail of blood ended with a man lying face up completely covered in blood. There were no police or ambulances there yet. This was on a highway in the suburbs of a major metropolitan area in the US, so plenty of people saw before the scene was taken hold of by emergency services. Turns out the truck driver had a partner with him. They got into an argument and the passenger stabbed the driver like a dozen times and then escaped. The murderer was caught about an hour and a half away, one state over, 2 days later. I have to imagine that I was about 5 minutes behind the truck pulling over because the police can be in that spot in about 30 seconds. being in the passenger seat in the right lane of the highway. I was about 10 feet from the body. Haunting image. I've posted this as a comment on another Ask Reddit before, so copy/paste. Also, this was technically a homicide, but was ruled as self-defense. To add, I was 13 yoff. My then 18-yo brother and his then 18-yo wife lived next door to a family with a teenage son. She started an affair with that 17-yo son. One day, the son barged into my brother's place and started attacking him. I don't know exactly why, but the wife didn't seem to want to move away with my brother to the army, or some dumb shit. My brother was packing and moving BC. He was leaving for the army. He had pulled down a metal pole in a closet to make room for boxes. My brother grabbed that pole and used it to fight off the teen. The kid ran out bleeding. My brother called my dad. We lived a few blocks down the street, and my dad jumped into action. He grabbed one of his hunting shotguns and some bird ammo. He ran out the door to the car screaming for us to call 911. My mom and I ran after him. BC, we were clueless and wanted to see where he was headed. My mom was on the phone with the cop and they were dispatching the one cop that we had in our town. We start running down the road to my brother's place. BC, we saw dad pull in. As we get near, we hear a gunshot and see my dad and brother taking cover behind the car doors they'd opened to climb in and leave. Another shot goes off and we can see it isn't my dad firing. The teen had run home next door and was bleeding and told his dad my brother was trying to kill him. His dad grabbed his handgun and saw my dad and brother leaving and started shooting. That's the gunfire Mom and I heard. Dumbass kept running towards my dad's car. I saw my dad position his shotgun in the car window and fire one round. Then, he and my brother climbed in the car and started driving back at us/home. We all finally get together and dad says he shot the man in the stomach. Chaos breaks out on our street. Ambulance, cops, and people. They take the other dad away to the hospital and my dad into custody. Within hours, we find out that the man has died. The birdshot hit his liver and he bled out. Turns out he was an alcoholic and his liver was not going to survive the trauma. My dad was charged with murder and we started receiving death threats. In the cover of night, we are moved. We hid for days until my dad was bonded out. Ended up moving far away. Grand jury was convened and I had to testify to what I saw. After all the evidence and testimony was presented, my father wasn't charged. BC, the grand jury decided it was self-defense. We never talk about what happened or anything. Things carry on as normal. That day is forever burned into my memory. I want to add this. My dad never recovered from taking a man's life, even though it wasn't intentional. He ended up hooked on heroin after the church couldn't save him. We lost him to his demons in 2008. My brother has done well for himself, but he had his own battles that he fights daily. I am not pro or anti-gun. I just wish this had never happened. BC, so many lives were changed. My brother divorced her after he left for the army. She is gone from our lives, forever. Also, added, I've tried to answer all the questions I can and added details to my op. A drunk man was pushed down some stairs by the bouncer. Unfortunately, the drunk man was unable to catch himself and instead spun around and landed on the pavement with the back of his head making first contact. He was aloof for a little while but quickly succumbed to his wound and arrested on the pavement. He was declared dead 15 minutes later in ED after being transported by ambulance. There was no CCTV or clear evidence of malicious intent that would hold up in court, and the man was known as a drunk and had no friends or family. It was ruled an accidental death. I had to walk past that spot most days going to work and will never forget his face, the look of mystified horror followed by the glassy-eyed slack-jawed expression that come with death. I was the medic that transported the man. I was by his side from start till the declaration. One of the most visceral experiences of my career thus far. I was riding my bike to work when I witnessed this attack. I was the first person to approach and I was sure this woman was going to die. I heard the truck before I looked, and I watched as she was run over completely with the truck. I watched as both sets of tires ran her over. It was and is the most horrible thing I have witnessed in my life. I was probably 100 to 150 feet away, and as soon as he pulled away I had to have an internal argument with myself about approaching. Like I didn't want to see a dead mangled person up close, but if there was any chance she was still alive I didn't want her to be alone. It was probably only a few seconds, but it felt like forever and then I went over. She was alive, and conscious. I tried to comfort her and started calling 911, but she only spoke Spanish so I wasn't able to really communicate with her. Another woman had seen as well and she came running over from across the street. She was able to come over and talk with her in Spanish while I called 911. I think she was able to help her call some family since I think we were all uncertain if the woman would live. The ambulance showed up pretty quickly and stabilized her. After she was taken away I went to work, and tried not to think about it. I actually actively avoided learning anything about the story until now, because the uncertainty of whether she died or not allowed me to believe she was okay. I didn't want to know if she died. This post actually prompted me to look up whether she lived or not, and this is the first time I've even tried to look up anything about that day. I'm happy she made it, and I hope she's doing well. Seeing someone try to kill someone changes you. I don't think about that day every day, but it definitely haunts me. Was working in the off-campus residences at my university. Over Christmas break when most of the students had gone home, I was still there keeping an eye on the place. I was in my little office that was in one of the apartment blocks, when I heard a pop, 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 pop noise. It really just sounded like some kids were letting off some small fireworks in the stairwell or something. I looked out of my office window, which was just outside of the bottom of the stairwell, facing south, to see if I could see what was up. As I looked out, 3 to 4 dudes come running down the stairs and take off running to the east toward the complex entrance. About 10 seconds later, another dude comes down the stairs and slowly walks off toward the southwest. I went outside to check and see if what damage had been caused by the fireworks, and went up the stairwell. As I got to the top, there was no fireworks debris or smoke or anything, but I saw a cell phone lying on the ground, and a single small hole in the wall outside the door of one of the units. At the other end of the corridor there was another stairwell, and at the bottom of that there was an old beater car just idling with the headlights on and a few of the doors just hanging open. Something was definitely fishy about it. I definitely had the what if those were gunshots? thought, but there was no gunpowder smell or blood or anything besides that one little hole. To play it safe, I called the cops who said they were sending someone over. The station is very close to the housing complex and they were there in less than a minute. I gave them a quick summary of what I saw, and they split up to go in the directions I told them that the people had headed. It was less than 30 seconds later that they found the lone guy that had gone off to the southwest. Turns out he had been shot multiple times, and had managed to walk across the parking area and turn behind a building before collapsing on the grass. They tried CPR, but when the ambulance arrived the paramedics pronounced him dead on the scene. The other cops who had gone east did find the other guy and arrested them. I ended up having to go testify in court during the trial of the guy that was supposedly the shooter. I told them basically what I wrote up here, but didn't know any of the people involved and never saw faces or anything of any real help to the police. I think I was basically there to establish timeline or something like that. Anyhow, I heard that it was basically a drug deal gone wrong. 2 different gangs from 2 different counties thought the residents' apartments would be empty over the holidays and set up a deal. One party tried to rip off the other party and someone got shot. As I understand it, the shooter guy got sent to prison. This was when I was in 2nd or 3rd grade, so late 80s. My friend's mom had picked us up from school in her station wagon and I was in the way back. There were probably 6 or 7 of us kids in the car and we were stopped at a traffic light across from a homeless shelter, about to get onto the interstate. This guy is walking down the street with an armful of chewing tobacco and drops a pack. A homeless guy leaning up against the wall picked it up. There was an angry exchange in which the guy refused to give back the tobacco, so the other guy kicked him and stomped him to death on the sidewalk. I was at the grand opening of a sports bar the night that Manny Pacquiao fought Chris Algieri. The bar was jam-packed beyond belief, so packed that you couldn't get back to your table without shimmying through the other patrons, trying not to put your butt on the back of their necks. Anyway, a guy who had paid, entered and had some drinks, went outside to take a smoke break. No smoking allowed in the bar. There was still an incredibly long line to get inside, so he tried to come back in the exit door. The bouncer told him he couldn't and that he would have to wait in line and come back in the main entrance, though he didn't have to pay again. The guy was pissed and tried to push past the bouncer. The bouncer eventually pushed him out the door and locked it. The guy then apparently went back home, grabbed his girlfriend's gun and came back to the bar. I learned this after the fact talking to the owner and via news coverage. He waited until someone left out the exit door, snuck inside and shot the bouncer in the back of the head several times. The bar was so packed that chaos ensued. Almost everyone hit the floor immediately. There were tables, food, drinks, keys, phones and people all laying on the floor. Other people ran outside. My buddies and I waited for a few minutes until we knew the coast was clear and then got the hell out of there. At the time, we didn't know all of what had happened. As we exited the bar, we literally had to step over the dead bouncer to get to the door. I was lucky enough to find my phone and keys amid the melee. One of my buddies found his keys but not his phone. He never got it back. Sadly, that sports bar never really recovered from that incident. It closed down for about a month before reopening, but it never achieved the popularity that it should have due to that incident.